Hello, my name is Wendell. Did you know that 60% of Americans suffer from some form of childhood trauma? And in men, it's alarmingly higher. Let that sink in for a moment. Every other man you meet has suffered from or witnessed some form of trauma. I'm sure if you're honest with yourself, you know of someone or you might even be part of that 60%. I stand before you today having navigated and recovered from childhood trauma, ready to share insights and hope with those on similar journeys. Childhood trauma has a widespread impact on children and is often hidden or not even reported. Today, I aim to break that silence and the stigma around childhood trauma, especially in adults. I also going to lay out a path to finding more peace and happiness by discovering, discarding, and dealing with childhood trauma. Who am I? I'm a professional man who has traveled the world working and running from myself. Some of you might relate to the running from yourself part. I used work, education, relocation, drugs, sex, alcohol, gambling, shopping, and I'm sure there's more that I can add to the list to show the world that I've arrived. Look at me. I've accomplished the American dream, but deep down inside, the fear of being found out caused me more pain than I could ever imagine. You see, I was abused when I was 8 years old, and the abuse followed me up until the time where I could acknowledge the abuse. That's where I discovered. I worked diligently on letting go of the abuse, discard, and then dealing with the aftermath of the abuse. First, a little bit about my childhood. I grew up in a brimming family with love, yet shadowed by loss. I'm the youngest of four boys, and my brother Anthony passed away a month or so after I was born. My parents, engulfed in their grief, found solace in their church community, which became a pillar of support for our family. Fortunately for me, a family in that community took me into their loving home for the first 18 months of my life. This I claim as a blessing instead of trauma. And the setback for me, this is I often wondered and sought for pictures of me. I used to cry myself to sleep at night, wondering why I never saw any pictures. My two brothers had this beautiful portrait on the calendar on the wall of my uncle's barber shop. They were sitting on a log. It was on the wall at our house. It was everywhere, even little handout calendars with their pictures on it. I used to ask my mom for the longest. She couldn't even tell me why I didn't see any pictures. You see, my dad was the one that liked pictures, but when I came along, pain was too great. I was left to my own reasoning. Why? And eventually I stopped asking. I could tell you, though, 50 years later, in a little box my mom had, we found one baby picture of me. What joy. What I give my mom that picture, man, I treasure to this day. I can imagine going 50 plus years without a baby picture and then finding one of yourself. Words cannot express the respect, the joy, and the love I have for my mom. To go through what she went through and to have the love she shows me regularly is nothing short of God's love for her and me. Maybe you can look back over your life and identify or relate to wondering what really went wrong, then finding the one thing you longed for. Amazing. Growing up, my life was a blend of joy and complexity. I played neighborhood hide and seek. I loved to swim. I climbed every tree around. One of my favorite trees was our mulberry tree. I would come down out of the mulberry tree with deep, dark purple fingers and lips. I wouldn't have a care in the world. How many of you know that I liked trees, but it was really just, I was just really hiding from the hurt and shame caused by the trauma. Roller skating was and still one of my favorite pastimes. I remember learning how to roller skate first in my mom's basement. My mom had a pair of skates with wood wheels, and of course, her skates were way too big for me. So I would clumsily learn how to skate and fall. And sooner or later, I was able to stand. The only way mom would let me go to the skating rink is when I could stand on my own. I finally made it to the skating rink and then the kiddie floor and even graduating to the big floor. I was a fast learner and performed all kinds of tricks, sliding sideways and eventually learning to do the hammer camel on a pair of roller skates. You try that at home. The skating rink would be so full of people. If one person fell, five or six other people, you'd see people jumping all over. If we had videos in those days, we would be TikTok sensations. Skating was about fun and resilience to me. Perhaps some of you have similar tales of joy intertwined with complexity. These moments of joy, however, were one side of my childhood. My parents, strict but loving, emphasized the importance of chores and homework. Yet my father's irritation during homework, landing, leading to harsh punishments instead of layer of anxiety, marred my childhood innocence. Reflecting on Zig Ziglar's words, different roads often lead to beautiful destinations. I see the truth in them, especially in my context of my journey. The abuse, confusing, and twisted mixture of pain and what I mistakenly perceived as affection. It was a secret I kept hidden deep within. As I grappled with feelings of shame and fear, Peter A. Levine, author of Healing Trauma, explains trauma as the often debilitating symptoms many people suffer in the aftermath of overwhelming experiences. I can truly say that abuse I suffered qualifies as an overwhelming experience. If hindsight is 2020, the way I would define my abuse is the sensual touch of another person created such a euphoric feeling that I tried to create that same feeling for much of my life. The trauma of chasing that feeling for over 50 years astonishes me to this day. So when I say I understand abuse as trauma, I do. But for God's grace, I was able to acknowledge what happened. I had come to grips with the past, played in it, and I was going to do about it. I was listening to a TED talk, Healing versus Retaliation, Surviving Trauma and Sexual Abuse, Peter and Adenike Harris. Adenike explained her willingness and decision to what wanting to be healed, her key to standing and healing her process. This was a must in my life as well. During my teenage years, I sought solace in alcohol and other substances, using them to shield myself from the pain. Addiction is giving up everything for one thing. Recovery is giving up one thing for everything. Rings true in my life. During junior high school, I was accepted into a vocational educational program. Choosing home economics was more than just being around girls and enjoying the practical lessons. It was my silent plea for normalcy amidst all the chaos. In my early 20s, despite A promising start at Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, my struggles with alcohol and substance led me to either losing my job or being laid off. Either way, they offered me a trade for the 4 years I worked for them, and I headed to Texas, naively hoping for a geographical cure to my deep rooted issues. Sometimes you find yourself in the middle of nowhere, and sometimes in the middle of nowhere, you find yourself. Mm, wow. Despite my struggles, I progressed in my career and as an electrician and eventually passed the City of Houston master's exam. This exam was an 8-hour exam that put me at the top of the blocks. And this achievement, which led to opening my own business, brought a sense of fulfillment unparalleled by any substance. But no matter what accomplishment I made, I still had that secret, that hole in my soul. And before long, I was back in the bar drinking and doing the things that landed me back into treatment and rehabilitation centers once again. I tell this story for the fact that I pursued success and usually obtained it. But with success comes the inflation of ego and more accomplishments and more to cover up the real problem. I didn't realize that the abuse lingered with me into my adult life. It just showed up as this, that, or the other. This time in rehab, I thought, Dad taught me to work hard, get a good job, a good education, get married, raise a family, have 2.5 kids, and live the American dream. So I went back to school thinking that education would fix me. I received my associate, bachelor's, and master's degree, but education wasn't the solution. It didn't fix the hole in my soul, which is just my fancy way of saying trauma. Shortly after graduating, establishing myself once again in the professional world, it wasn't long before I was back in the same environment, drinking and using things to erase the hole in my soul. Trauma. Shaking my head and asking myself, why? What was wrong with me? I've accomplished everything my dad taught me. Education, check. Good job, check. Family, check. House, kids, the American dream, check, check, check. I was devastated. I'm a master electrician. I fix things for a living, but I couldn't fix the hole in my soul. Back into treatment once again. This time was a little different. I used to seek church and religious remedies, which only temporarily worked for me. Then a friend of mine sent me a link to a podcast by Reverend Michael Beckwith. That Beckwith really caught my attention. He discussed the parable of an acorn. God placed everything in an acorn it needed to become a mighty oak. All it really was lacking was the right environment. And then the magic came. He said, God also placed in each of us everything we need to be and to live on purpose. This resonated with me and cut me to the core. Imagine the change. Imagine the environment. All of these things would help me live on purpose. This story took me back to childhood when I was playing neighborhood tag around the oak tree. It's standing right there next to it, home base. I can smell the warm summer day. I can hear the quiet noise of the neighborhood. The kids standing waiting to go high. My arms across my eyes and leaning on the peak on the oak tree, peeking and singing 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. All the kids running, hiding. I'd get to 100 and say, ready or not, here I come. Wow, those were the days. the days of drinking water from the water hoses, to be home by the time the street lights come on, and sometimes being invited to stay for dinner at a friend's house. Those were good old days when life was simple. Ironically, the oak tree is a symbol of wisdom, longevity, strength, courage, and divine protection. Although I face some difficult times, I know that God has always had my back. Embracing this new perspective, I embarked on a 6 week self paced program focused on healing from childhood trauma. Actually, this program afforded me the time to journal and it took me over 5 months to finish the course. It was an intense. I answered every question. I performed every drill. I studied every book presented. I dug deep into additional books regarding shadow work, and I completed the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. That program, the sponsor, connecting to a power greater than myself, catapulted me on this journey. And I'm happy to report through prayer and meditation, willingness, sheer determination, and daily journaling, I started unraveling the core of my trauma. I also incorporated a holistic approach to healing, which entails daily practice every morning, getting up, prayer, meditation, reading, and a commitment to physical exercise. This routine, performed regularly, sounds simple, but takes persistence and has afforded me the willingness to forgive my abusers. And most of all, forgive myself, which in turns allows me to live in peace and happiness. Take care of your body is the only place you have to live, Jim Rohn states. For me, the keys to recovery are one, acknowledging trauma, first and foremost. For the longest time, I felt there wasn't anyone I could discuss the issue with. Couldn't discuss it with my pastor. He would tell my wife, my friends. It's just I would lose faith. It was more important to save face, as I did when I was young, than to ask for and seek help. Two, engaging, learning, and self explanation to identify the trauma understood by my behaviors and discover healthy ways to cope with the aftermath. Also, a support group was key. I found a few closed mouth friends that could talk about anything, and my abuse slowly came out into the open. Three, embracing physical conditioning, which greatly aids the mental aspect of recovery. The body achieves what the mind believes. Now, my mission to help others facing similar paths of trauma by sharing my story and my recovery journey from childhood. My aim is to offer others a blueprint for peace and happiness through discovering, discarding, and dealing with their own traumas. I've developed a coaching program, a support system, and a platform designed to guide you through the pain and the recovery process, providing the necessary resources to aid you on this healing journey. If you're struggling with past trauma, know that you're not alone. There is not there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside. Mayu Angelo. Whatever you do, find a personal coach, a support group, a counselor, or someone who can help guide you along your journey. Do not suffer in silence. We are only as sick as our deepest, darkest secret. Confronting trauma is not just about personal healing. It's about breaking a cycle for future generations. My story is a testament to the power of resilience and transformation. Remember, existence is no mistake. It's a profound miracle, just like mine. Stand up for your trials, stand up for the setbacks, stand up for the hurts and pains. Stand up for the lies told and the lies you've told. Stand up and be free. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm Wendell Holmes, and I believe in the miracle of each life's journey. The only impossible journey is the one you never began. Tony Robbins. Thank you.